Good morning. Welcome to the 12th of October meeting of Planning Committee North. This meeting is being held remotely as well as live streamed, and the recording will be available afterwards on our website. Councillors and officers are reminded to mute their microphones and turn off their cameras when not speaking, as this will reduce feedback, background noise and save bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. This is the first time we are streaming the meeting in this way, which has enabled us to allow public speaking at the Planning Committee. So please bear with us if there are any technical glitches. I am Councillor Joanna Howell and I am Chairman of the committee today. I will take a roll call to check all members are expected to attend at present. Also joining us are Stacey Robbins, Head of Planning, Environmental Services, Doug Moss, Planning Team Leader North, and John McSweeney, Assistant Team Leader North. The committee clerk today is Katie Maxwell. Members of the committee will be making decisions today by a named vote in the alphabetical order. The Deputy Chairman, Councillor Waller, will call out each name and they will answer for, against or abstain. Members, please remember to turn on your microphone again at this point. As with our usual procedure, local members sitting on the committee can speak and make recommendations, but cannot vote on applications within their ward. They will therefore state local member when their name is called. Because of this new format, members are encouraged to make their comments concise and pertinent to ensure the smooth running of the meeting. However, should a member lose sound during the debate and miss part of the discussion, they will regrettably not be allowed to vote. Before this meeting, speakers for or against an application have had an opportunity to register and submit their representations via email or video format. And those with submissions have been published alongside of the paperwork pertaining to their specific application for members' consideration prior to this meeting. I would also remind speakers that for major applications you have 3 minutes and for other applications you have 2 minutes, and the Deputy Chairman will be timing your contribution and ask you to wind up in one sentence. We will stop for a comfort break at approximately 11:30 and members are reminded not to press leave meeting. Just remember to turn off your camera and to keep your microphone off. We will consider the applications in the order that they are shown on the papers. I also want to remind agents and applicants of their responsibilities for completing seal forms to avoid possible financial penalties. I will now hand over to Katie, who will take us through items 2 to 5 as listed on the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies. We have received an apology for absence from Councillor Patterson-Vanegas. Item 3 is declaration of substitute members. Councillor Obard is substituting for Councillor Patterson-Vanegas. Item 4, declarations of interest. I'm not aware of any at this time. However, members can declare an interest at any time should they realise they need to do so. Item 5 is the minutes. I understand that Councillor Steadman has agreed to propose and Councillor Waller has agreed to second the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, the 15th of October 2020, and I consider everyone is in agreement unless they state otherwise now. The minutes are approved and a hard copy will be signed by the Chairman at a later date. I shall now hand back to the Chair.
Thank you. We will now proceed to the roll call. And when I call your name, can you please say that you are here? Councillor Bowdler. Councillor Bowdler.
Yeah, give me a chance. I'm here.
You are first. B. Councillor Firth.
Present.
Councillor Hallett.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Present.
Councillor Owen Williams.
Present.
Councillor Obard.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Redman.
Present.
Councillor Roundell.
Present.
Councillor Steadman.
Present.
Councillor Waller.
Present, Chair.
And I am also here. I also want to make clear, Mr. Robbins, are you here?
Yes, good morning, Chairman and members.
I also want to see Mr. Moss, are you also here?
Present, Chair.
Mr. McSweeney, are you here?
Present, Chair.
Yes, present,
And
Chair.
you will also see that beside the clerk, we also have Mrs. Newton-May and Mrs. Clemens in attendance. They will help facilitate certain items when we're running through the meeting. I am the ward member on the next item, which is WD 2020-0717. So therefore, I will hand over to Councillor Waller, who will be the chairman for this part of the meeting. Mr. Robbins, you wanted to speak.
Chairman, through you, just very briefly, agenda item 6 is the outstanding items. I think you were going to skip that item and go to item 7, the Wadhurst item, but there is a very short update on the outstanding items. The Springfield Green Lane item in Crowborough, which the committee had previously deferred, asking for revisions. Very briefly, to advise the committee that we have received revisions to that scheme and they are out to consultation. We have had some representations received in regard to those changes, and we will be reporting that most likely to the next meeting of PCM. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Robbins. Right, Mr. Councillor Waller, I will hand over to you, and you are now in charge. Good luck.
Thank you, Chair. So first item is item 7, WD/2020/0717/Major, Buell Water, Buell Bridge Lane, Cowsley Wood, Wadhurst, pages 13 to 56 on your agenda papers regarding a proposal or application for camping facilities. I have to say, I'll go in a minute to the officer for an update, but we do have 5 speakers on this. We have a Mr. Carinanti, who has submitted a statement to the website, a Mr. Ford, who has also submitted a statement to the website, Polly Canning, who will be joining us live in the meeting and will make a statement live to us, and we have 2 local members, Councillor Howell and Councillor Stanley, who will also be addressing the meeting. So first of all, I'd like to go to officers, please, for an update on this application.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, if I can just give a quick brief summary of the proposal, and then I'll move to the slides and I'll run through the slides. Temporary permission is sought for a 3-year period for a campsite for up to 80 pitches between May and September. It is proposed to divide the campsite into 3 clusters: campsite area B, C and D, based around the physical features on site and existing general road arrangements. Zone B will provide 15 pitches, Zone C 20 and Zone D 45. As you'll be aware, Buell Water is a reservoir open to the public and which provides access to visitors, including anglers, sailing club members, ramblers and cyclists. The recreation and leisure facilities at Buell Water are open to the public throughout the year. The whole of the reservoir, shore area and surrounds are located in the countryside and within the High Weald Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. Some members may recall a previous application submitted in 2017, which sought permission for the construction of visitor accommodation in the form of 58 self-contained earth lodges. This application was appealed prior to determination. The appeal was dismissed on the 3rd of October last year. The inspector concluded that the proposal would not meet the criteria for development in the countryside or the council's policies which support the development of visitor accommodation, and it would have a significant harmful effect on the site and surrounding landscape within the High Weald Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. The council considers that the 2 schemes are different. The scheme before you today would not result in a permanent change in landscape character, as was the case with the previous refused scheme, the construction of the earth lodges. The importance of Buell Water, the region's tourism industry, is long established, and activities at Buell have changed and improved over the years to respond to visitor needs and demand. This proposal will provide more flexibility in the length of time spent within the Buell complex, which in turn will encourage greater spending both on site and within the surrounding local area. In this regard, there is support expressed both in the MPPF and in the development plan policies to the general principles of supporting the rural economy and the role that the provision of tourist accommodation can play in this aim. Furthermore, there is government COVID help for tourism and camping as part of the restart and recovery. However, this benefit has to be weighed against its visual and other impacts within the R&B, where the highest level of protection is afforded to its landscape and scenic beauty. The weight afforded to and impact on the area of outstanding natural beauty has to be carefully considered. Although there would be some visual impact in immediate views, these would be limited. Given the non-permanent nature of the campsite, seasonal occupation period and existing lawful use or part of the site for boat storage, it is officer opinion that a campsite here would not be unduly intrusive upon the High Weald and its special features. Officers have given careful consideration as to whether this proposal constitutes major development or not, with a view that due to the non-permanent nature of a campsite, seasonal occupation period coupled with the lawful use of part of the site as boat storage yard, and that the development is land use only and not permanent, that it does not constitute major development in terms of paragraph 172. The impact on neighbouring properties needs to be carefully considered. Both local residents have stated that complaints have been made directly to Buell Water. However, there have been no history of complaints to the council as a direct result of the campsite, which has been running for 28 days a year since 2018. A noise management plan has been submitted with the application, which has been considered by Environmental Health. The conclusions of which are that a well-managed campsite can enable such a leisure facility to be operated on this site without causing demonstrable harm to the residential meters of the nearest residential properties. The proposed access arrangement is wholly internal, and the main access to Buell Water will be utilised for both entry and exit. Details have been provided of the two options to how this can be achieved, and these are shown on page 50 of the agenda report. Either by creating a formal one-way system throughout the whole site or by making the top road two-way, by localised widening or passing places. The access on Brewbridge Lane will be closed to traffic other than for emergency periods. The High Authority support the use of Buell Water internal road network and have recommended conditions to this effect. Highway England have now been consulted in regard to impact on the A21 and raised no objections. If I can now just share the slides with you. Hopefully that has all come up.
Yes, it has, Mr. McSweeney.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just an aerial overview of the site, Buell Water. Reservoirs to the south. This is the Southern Water Service Treatment. This is the Education Centre. Hope you can all see my cursor. This area here is the main car parking area for visitors. Here is the Visitor Centre. This is the main entrance into the water with the boathouse just where my cursor is. This is an area of ancient woodland. This area here, which I'm just circulating, is the area where boat storage has been used and is currently still being used. And the application relates to this area here, which is shown where it's with boats currently, and also this green field here. This is proposed site layout. So as I alluded to earlier, there is 3 camping zones. Zone B, which is this area here, which is proposed for 15 pitches. Zone C, which is this area which I'm just highlighting now, which is for 20 pitches. And Zone D, which is this area here, field, which is for 45 pitches. Members will be aware that the scheme previously or originally proposed an increase in pitches to 100, and this included this area here, and that was proposed as Zone A camping. Obviously, this has now been omitted from the proposal, and it is just these 3 areas, B, C and D, are which are for consideration today. Just run through some pictures. This is looking south across Zone D. The reservoir is can just be glimpsed through there. This is looking across Zone C. This area tree belt here is the ancient woodland. This is looking west with Zone C to your left. This is Zone B up here to your right, and nearest residential properties are just behind this bank of trees here. This is looking north towards Brewbridge Lane, which runs behind these trees. So this is Zone B here, and Zone A was previously in this area, which I'm just highlighting now. This is looking towards the centre of the site across Zone C. This is taken from the shoreline. This is the boathouse. This is area I'm just highlighting now is of ancient woodland. So camping Zone C and B are behind here, and Zone D is up behind here. This is a lower access lane. So this area to your right is the ancient woodland, and just behind this red car is camping Zone C. This is looking towards centre of the site. Zone C, I'm just highlighting with my pen. So this area here, which was previously Zone A, but has now been omitted. As you can see, it has been fenced off by post and rail fence, which goes up all up the access road, and also demarks Zone B from A with the fence, which you can just see. I'm just highlighting there. This is taken with you back to Buell Bridge Lane, so it's looking south over Zone B. So this is area of ancient woodlands, and it is the reservoir is just behind here. If I can just stop sharing. As members will be aware, as an update circulated yesterday, which is amendment to condition 3 or the wording, and two additional conditions have been suggested, which remove the 28-day PD rights for camping and also remove the right for the site to be used under licence as a campsite. The recommendation is as per the agenda report. Thank you, Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. McSweeney. So we've had 3 members of the public who wish to comment on this. 2 have submitted their views of objection to the website. Firstly, but I'll give a précis of those. Firstly, Mr. Carinante, who says inaccuracy in the report, more residential properties affected, 16 neighbours experienced noise complaints overlooked, and poor conduct of campers when they stayed in Zone A, although we've just heard from Mr. McSweeney that Zone A is not going to be used. Second is from a Mr. Ford, also objecting. Conflict with national policy in AONB. This is a major development, does not meet the test of exceptional circumstances in the public interest, limited economic benefit to Wilden, much of the site open field, not used for boat storage. 43 household objections are summarised re noise, poor operation of the site, size, loss of tranquility and prejudice to sailing. Restriction on number of pitches meaningless, must focus on tent or people numbers. The third speaker is Polly Canning, who is in the meeting, who is speaking in favour. So hopefully Polly will come live now. Yes, sure, I can see you, Polly. So just to confirm, as the chair said at the start of the meeting, you will have 3 minutes, and we will give you a warning if you've exceeded your 3 minutes. So okay. You are ready. You are live and ready to go, Polly.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Polly. I'm the planning consultant who submitted this application, and I want to start by setting out that Buell has already been running a successful camping operation for a number of years. Historically, the Scouts and Sailing Club used the site for camping in combination with Kent County Council's Outdoor Education Centre, and then when the Marcus Group purchased the site, camping was opened up to the public. This has been operating under permitted development rules, whereby camping is allowed for a set number of days and weekends a year. As a leisure and recreation operator, Buell obviously want to make the most of what they can offer during the summer months and capitalise on the ever-increasing demand for camping. Even before the pandemic, there's been a growing trend towards staycations. This year, demand's gone through the roof, and to put it frankly, if we don't make the most of this demand and expand the existing operation, then these tourists will simply go elsewhere to other areas that have adapted quicker. Meanwhile, wild camping is growing in popularity, and we believe that this can be discouraged by providing a safe, secure and affordable camping space in a managed location such as Buell. We recognise that there is some local objection, but please note there's also a lot of support for the scheme. A big supporter is the Council's Tourism Department. Their consultee response specifically highlights the fact that the Wadhurst area has very limited accommodation options. The General Manager of Scotney Castle, along with the head of 1066 Country Marketing, which is a public-private partnership responsible for marketing tourism in East and Sussex, have also written in support. This is driven by the fact that the local economy will benefit, with new jobs and an increase in expenditure in our local villages and town. At a time of increasing uncertainty where the economy is clearly struggling, opportunities to create new jobs and bring money into the district should not be turned down. Other supports coming from young families who want to use the facility. Camping offers an affordable means of accommodation, and the proposal would allow more people to access and appreciate the special landscape and qualities of the AONB. It would allow more people to engage with nature and would have a direct benefit on individual health and well-being. In terms of the impact on the AONB, the proposed site is one of the less visible parts of Buell. It is well screened by the topography and the surrounding woodland. Tellingly, the AONB unit have not refused or objected to the scheme. The area proposed for camping was used to store boats. Now we're seeking consent for a non-permanent campsite. It's only temporary in nature, 3 years, sensitive to its surroundings and environmentally responsible. As an experienced leisure operator, it's in Buell Water's best interest to ensure that the campsite does not cause nuisance to the surrounding areas and neighbouring properties. There is a noise management in place and a code of conduct which campers have to sign up to when they book their pitch in advance before arrival. The campsite's supervised 24 hours of the day. The government have gone out of their way this year to offer full support to campsites, recognising that they bring in much needed investment and employment opportunities into areas at a time of considerable need. The planning officers recommended approval, setting out clearly the benefits that will be gained from the proposal, and we hope that members will back the scheme and provide their full support. Many thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Polly. So obviously very welcome to stay in the meeting for the rest of the discussion, but please could you just take your camera off?
Will do. Thank you.
So there are two local members for this ward. The first is Councillor Stanley.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This site has had a number of different applications in recent years from successive owners, and unfortunately each one seems to be worse than the one before, which I think is disappointing. And I should say I'm not against some overnight accommodation, but to the present owners and previous owners, I have said a small, emphasis on small, hotel near the visitor centre would be preferable to this application, as it would give control over noise and light pollution that is rightly mentioned by so many objectors. However, you need to decide this morning on the application in front of you. It's mentioned in the report, and I recognise that Buell is a tourist attraction, but it's attractive because it is tranquil and peaceful setting, and any move to me towards a holiday camp should be resisted, and this application refused. There are also a number of problems with the application, which in many ways seems a bit rushed. The application refers to camping, which I think, and when I first read it, I assumed would mean tents. But if you look at recommendation 6, it actually says the site shall be used for accommodation of tents and motorised caravans. That is a massive difference between a campsite and motorised camper vans. Motorised camper vans can be really quite large vehicles and often have a separate car that they tow for local journeys. So 80 tents on Buell would be an intrusion, but a field full of motorhomes would be a significant detrimental effect on the AONB. The application also gives some mixed signals on other items. It says about no electric hookup for the motorhomes, but that would presumably mean that they'd have to run their engines now and again to top up the batteries. The site says it's closed at 8 p.m. to the public, which it is, but campers will be allowed in until 10. And then he goes on to say that it's going to encourage local business. Well, I have to say local restaurants and pubs are not going to enjoy a great revenue if their clientele have got to leave to get back to Buell by 9:45 for the curfew. So I don't think it actually will help, although I suspect that the 10 o'clock curfew will not be enforced. It's been talked about car parking, and I think the committee would have to have reassurance that sufficient car parking, but it seems to me they're going to use part of the current car parking for camping, and therefore that will put pressure on it. The other factor is toilet block. The provision of facilities, toilets, washrooms is to me inadequate for the number of expected users. And frankly, a lack of nearby toilets will only encourage what I would describe as alfresco solutions by campers with houses only 100 metres away, not a pleasant thought. And we have heard that there have been complaints about the camping that's already taken place. It also says that campfires are banned, great, but a fire pit, well, a fire pit is going to encourage larger groups. Again, this gives mixed messages with increased noise which travels across the water. And we know around that fire pit there's alcohol going to be involved. Fine, people are enjoying themselves, no problem with that. But you are near water, and there seems to be minimal safety and minimal staff on site overnight. In terms of the highways, I accept the A21 can take the traffic. There's no problem with that, and we have heard, and I think it's important that the traffic for the site goes on the estate roads and not on Buell Bridge Lane, because there have been problems down there in the past. When Buell was authorised, I think in 1968, I think the Medway Act, the concept was to use a reservoir for recreational use, rowing, sailing, etc., which I totally agree with. The demands on the sailing club by the previous owners, not the present owners, I have to say, were so onerous it became financially unviable, rather than a lack of local demand for sailing and water sports. And I say I have met Marcus Study and the previous owners, the site as a whole, and I think this is they're going to develop it in sections, which I'm not sure gives the right the right result. And I would encourage them to look at how they can encourage sailing, water sports, quiet water sports, not high speed boats or anything like that. And because that was what was envisaged when Southern Water leased the site. And I would ask PCN to reject the application, which is an intrusion in a very sensitive area of the AONB. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. The second local member is Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Stanley has said pretty much all the things I would have said as well, but I will probably repeat them at the risk of repeating myself endlessly. I think this application is too soon. We're not against any kind of development in this site or on this site. I think it's a necessary requirement. This has been here a very long time, and we've all been very privileged to use it. It is lovely, it is peaceful, it is tranquil, it is all the things that you are seeking in the AONB. So to put in a lot of multicoloured tents, motorhomes into the most sensitive place in the AONB is actually sheer downright thuggery, to my point of view. You're going to turn it into a theme park with water slides. The harm will definitely outweigh the good. You will be taking away the one thing that you are hoping that people are going to enjoy and giving them something that they will no longer be able to enjoy. It is just wrong. It is just wrong. The harm definitely outweighs the good in this place. You've had 54 objections, 2 of the parishes object. This is a major. It is not a major, as has been suggested. That is a disingenuous suggestion, I would say. I also want to say that possibly not this owner, but certainly previous owners have not followed the local guidance. They have not followed the local bylaws. They have had no respect for looking after this very, very sensitive area. I know this, and I know this well. I go down to this area myself every day. And I'd also like to say that Mr. McSweeney has suggested that there have been no complaints. Well, of course there haven't been complaints, because the locals have complained to the owners. That's what most normal people would do. But of course now we were asking them to only reply to Wilden. So my suggestion is that this is too soon. I would ask you to refuse it. We're not against something here, but this is not it. And I would ask you to respectfully refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Before I open this up to the committee, could I come to officers if you need to respond to anything that any member of the public or any member has said? If you don't turn on your cameras, Mr. Robbins.
Chairman, very briefly, just to confirm that I don't think we need to come in at this point. I think you can go to the debate and we'll see where we go and answer questions in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Okay, so I'll open it up to the committee. The first person is Councillor Firth. Councillor Firth.
Thing.
There we go.
Sorry, having a few issues. I've already been chucked out once today, and the cameras aren't working. My question is that in the past, temporary accommodation has been given for these sites, and now they want another temporary accommodation or planning for it. My question is, if we refuse it this time, or if we are uncertain of its suitability this time, what position will that place us in as far as appeals are concerned? Because we can't keep 1 minute passing something and then the next minute saying, no, it's not right for this area. It's a bit of a funny question, or a bit of a funny situation. So could the officers please explain what the implications could be for refusal?
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Sorry, I should have said we'll carry on with the format we have been using previously. That will have 3 questions and then officers. So next person to speak is Councillor Bowdler, and then at this stage I don't actually have any other speakers so far. So,
thanks, Chair. I would like to ask a couple of questions. One is, what is the proposed use for Zone A now that it's not being used as a campsite? And two, can the officers please expand on the point that was raised by Councillor Stanley about the toilet block and how large it is, and is it suitable for the number of sites proposed? Having said that, I do want to say that it's unfortunate that we seem not to be able to facilitate tourism into our area when we're going to need all the help we can get in the recovery phase after this COVID. And I haven't heard from the two local members any legitimate planning reasons that we could use in refusing this, when we all know that at worst they can revert to the previous system of 28 days camping without planning permission. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bowder. Next is Councillor Slepin.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of thoughts, but I think they're I'll hold back and would like to come back with your indulgence later. But Polly Canning said that they've been using the 28-day ruling for a while. We know that they did it last summer, and we know that they took advantage of the increased days offered by the government. So I believe I'm right in saying that they were open for 56 days. I think that's correct, but it was obviously a longer time. So I wonder how many years this has been going on, because my concern is if this is refused, they still have that right for the 28 days camping per year. And at the moment, that is completely uncontrolled. I believe that this application has put us in a really difficult position, really between that awful expression, a rock and a hard place, because even if we refuse and they go to appeal, I think they could carry on next summer with the 28 days and maybe the extension the government may offer again. So I'd like to start with how long have they been using the PD rights, and reiterate my concern, whether it's for the PD rights or for this temporary permission, that I do not believe the number of small toilet blocks suggested is sufficient, and I would like some detail of them. You know, are they the sort of plush ones you get at weddings, or are they the sort of slightly lesser quality that you might get at a festival or an event? And when the water, or whatever the green liquid is called, runs out pretty quickly, that's my concern actually as well. So I'd like to come back when the debate has expanded a bit more, but I'll leave that there with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slepin. So if I could come to officers now to address the points that those three councillors have made.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and through you. If I take them in the reverse order, if I may, Councillor Mrs Stedman's questions first. The report explains that the applicant drawing on permitted development rights that are available to them, which I should stress is perfectly acceptable. You know, we must not be seen to be criticising any landowner that draws upon rights that are open to them and afforded to them by statute. Permitted development rights have been used since 2018, I think the report sets out. So, you know, it's a couple of years that they've been doing that, which I think chimes with the change in ownership, which several speakers have already mentioned so far during the debate. The matter of lavatory provision is set out in the report on pages 38, the bottom of 38, and then 39. There's a separate consenting regime through the Caravan Sites Act 1960 as amended, subsequently amended, with a ratio of people on site and for the number of pitches. And although the applicants are content that that is met with the existing provision within permanent structures already on site within the visitor centre and boathouse, there is this commitment, Chairman, to provide additional facilities. And you would expect them to say that because it goes to the attractiveness of the site and whether people will be happy to come and, you know, pay money to stay there. If there's inadequate facilities, then they probably won't come back. So there is this commitment to topping up the provision within a temporary structure, which is explained on the top of page 39. Councillor Mrs. Firth's first question was some uncertainty about what might happen if there's a refusal, a sort of indication that temporary consents had been given before. I think the point, Chairman, as is set out in the history, and Mr. McSweeney explained, there was a previous, there has been a relatively recent refusal of planning permission, and then a non-determination appeal that Mr. McSweeney referred to in his presentation and is set out in the report. That appeal was rejected, but for a materially different scheme, as is set out in the report. And the conclusions of the inspector are praised within the committee papers. That inspector felt that the permanent earth shelter structures were harmful to the AONB and a sort of permanent form of accommodation. And as the report explains, Chairman, the current scheme is very much a product of that appeal, that the applicants have considered potential options in light of that rejected appeal and have come forward with this alternative form of accommodation, if you like, albeit temporary within camping, and have placed quite a significant emphasis on the trial period. You know, it's a temporary consent. I think them recognising that there are issues at the site, there are objections at the site, as we've heard, parish councils and indeed local residents. So they're asking for a trial run in order to convince everybody, including the committee, but also local residents that are close by and are objectors and have set out concerns and worries about what's been going on at the site, you know, to persuade them that they can do a good job here. And I can really say no more than that in answer to Councillor Firth's question. There probably would be an appeal if the committee decided to withhold consent and refuse permission for the temporary application. We probably would be back in front of an inspector, but that's the same with every application. And Chairman, Councillor Bowdler asked a couple of questions, 2 or 3 questions. The Zone A, which has now been withdrawn, so there's a revision to the scheme. So there's 100 pitches initially, as the report explains, we're down to 80, and because the Zone A, which is the closest to the western edge of the site, and the 2 properties that are closest there, is shown free of development. So there's already, as Mr. McSweeney showed in the presentation, there's a landscape strip that's proposed as part of the works as a sort of buffer, separation distance. Zone A is shown free of any development or any use. The suggested updated conditions would withdraw permitted development rights from the part of the site, including Zone A. So within the temporary trial 1 period, there could be no more permitted development relied upon, because it would breach the condition, and Zone A would not be used. Were it to be used, Chairman, then of course that would be a breach of the consent, and I think it would be unlikely that would happen, you know, during the 3-year period where they were trying to demonstrate that they could, you know, run the site in the way that they set out in the submission. Councillor Bowdler also asked about the toilets, which I think I've answered. And then there was also a permitted development question. So I think I've covered them all, but please say if I've missed them. Thank you, Chair. Coming back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Mr. McSweeney, would you like to add anything further?
No, I think Mr. Robbins covered it all. Thank you.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. So I've got Councillor Owen Williams, then Councillor Robbard, and then Councillor Bowdler are the next 3. So Councillor Owen Williams.
Am I live?
Yes, you are live. You're okay. So you don't have to say "Are you live?" anymore, because you are.
Oh, is that gone now?
Yeah, you're automatically live.
Right. Yeah, I think we're going to have to come up with a new acronym for areas in the northeast of Wealdon. The area of more outstanding natural beauty, because the standard does seem to be a lot higher than other parts of the county, particularly Crowborough. But listening to what's been said, it seems to me that with personal finances being affected by the current crisis and foreign holidays cancelled, it could well be that in 6 months' time this is still the case, and families do need reasonably priced holidays in this country. So it seems a little bit sad to exclude them from that. Also, with the increase in house building, families deserve affordable access to the A and B as much as everyone else, and obviously to water activities. It's a beautiful place. I've camped there myself. It's a great facility that we have there, and I think it should be shared with people. If we ignore the predictable local protests, which, you know, I'm sure are perfectly reasonable if you live nearby, but possibly no more than that, there appear to have been no problems in the time that they've had temporary camping there. So after 3 years of this temporary application, should it be approved, we can assess what the impact has been, and if it's been bad, we can stop it, and if it's been okay, we can carry on. Without that, we don't find out. I don't see the numbers as great. I don't see that to be an issue. Many more people have camped there over the years. Many bigger events have happened there over the years without any issues. So to me at this stage, it feels like an application that doesn't give me any serious problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Next is Councillor Obbard.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I haven't made up my mind on this as yet, but I do have a comment and also a concern. In the officer's summary, he mentions about the NPPF. In section 172, it talks about conserving and enhancing the landscape and the scenic beauty. But then later, just in the same paragraph almost, is saying that the campsite would not be unduly intrusive. And I don't see that not being unduly intrusive is the same as conserving and enhancing the landscape. So I just like to make that comment because it is the AONB and we do need to look after it. And I take Councillor Owen Williams' comments, and that is got to be part of our reasoning as well. But I do have a concern, and one of the other things that's been said is that it's considered that a well-managed campsite would be fine, and I can't disagree with that, Chair, but I visited the site quite recently, and there's obviously a large sign up that says no paddleboarding. Perfectly reasonable to just have that, but there were people paddleboarding. There was nobody there controlling what was asked to be done. And we heard that the campsite in the previous incarnation has not been very well controlled. And I have a concern that it won't be controlled very well in the future. So those are my concerns, that we've got remnants of ancient woodland right next to the campsite, and you just concerned that there may be dogs and people trampling and looking for firewood and goodness knows what without very much supervision. And also there was as mention of will there be a curfew at 10 o'clock at night, and how well is that going to be controlled? And that is a concern. Thank you, Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Obbard. Next is Councillor Bowdler.
Thank you, Chair. I do think we're being a bit narrow-minded. We want to share our natural beauty with the rest of the country, and I think we need to do that. I did just want to make one point, and that is when I ask a question, not necessarily because I don't know the answer. It's to give officers the opportunity to answer that question so that everybody gets an opportunity to hear the answer who may not have access to the papers. I will actually, Chairman, if you'll allow me, make a proposal to accept the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowdler. I'll just ask at this stage, is there a seconder for Councillor Bowdler's proposal? Peter, you immediately said put your into the chat box. Would you like to come on? Is that a seconder?
No, it's not a seconder.
Okay, I'll let you, because I've got a few other people lined up, so I'll add you next to in the order. Okay, so we've had 3 further questions or statements from members. Could officers please respond to those, please?
Chairman, through you, I don't think Councillor Owen Williams actually asked a question. Obviously, he addressed the committee and set out his views. All I would say in regard to that is I noted down that a couple of times within Councillor Owen Williams's address, he said there didn't seem to be any problems. Mr. Pracy, you all heard him. All I would just like to say is that objectors to the scheme have reported issues. Those are set out in the report, but it's a sort of I'm not trying to cut across what Councillor Owen Williams has said, but it's a sort of, if you like, minor correction that people have reported concerns and reservations about use of the site. Councillor Robbard set out, well, he referred to the NPPF and the point about, or rather the distinction between the NPPF requirement to give great weight to conserving the natural beauty of the area versus the assessment set out in the committee papers by officers in regard to our view as officers in regard to the potential impact on the area. And all I would say, Chairman and members, is that there's a judgment to be brought to bear there, as you would expect. And members are used to dealing with this type of issue. I don't think there is a discrepancy between the requirement in the guidance and what officers have set out. Of course, the committee can and do arrive at a different view. I mean, at the top of the debate, Councillor Howell made clear that in her view, the scheme did constitute major development, going back to para 172 of the NPPF, I mean, Chairman, whereas the officers are of the view that the scheme is not major development. So just to be clear, it is a major application in terms of its sort of administration and its title. You know, the suffix to the application is a major scheme, but in terms of the impacts and the harm and the assessment and para 172 of the NPPF, for us as officers, we do not feel that a temporary use of the land constitutes major development in the meaning of 172 to the NPPF, and we set out why in the report. But it's a judgment. Again, it's an assessment, and the committee might debate that further and arrive at the view that they agree with the officer's assessment. So, in conclusion, on Councillor Robbard's point, it's a judgment and assessment having regard to the circumstances and the facts. I think those are all the questions that were raised, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Robbins. Okay, if I now come to Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. In theory, I like it. I like the idea of having the campsite and expanding on it for all the reasons that people have, already put forward. I think there will be commercial benefit, pubs, local shops, etc., etc. I think we do need to support, commerce in the area. We've got COVID-19 going on. That ties in with staycations, etc. The people there do have experience. I know there's a question there, but they do have experience of running, the campsite. They have a code of conduct they're going to put in place, which obviously it takes care of the noise. Again, in theory, highways have no objections. It goes out onto the A21. They're looking at an internal, traffic plan to deal with the traffic as well. They've taken away Zone A to give a buffer zone. I think they have. They are sort of trying here. AON and B have not objected. My only concern, and again, as Councillor Robbard sort of put forward, is the control. And the question would be, what enforcement options do we have if we were to pass this today and there were issues within a 3-year trial, shall we say? What can we do? And I know this is a bit of an open question. What can we do to enforce everything that the people should be doing should they fail to be running the place properly, and should they fail to be putting their noise plan in place, etc. That would be my question, Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Randall, you're next, and thank you for waiting.
Yeah, tricky one, this one, isn't it? I read the officer's report and I thought this is probably going to be an outright refusal. I then read the design and access statement, and although I remember one officer in the planning side said you should never read the design and access statement, it's the last thing you should read because they generally tend to be a statement of fiction. I thought the design and access statement actually was a very good one and covered an awful lot of points which have been raised, which officers have also covered. And I was beginning to think, oh well, maybe this is one to perhaps accept with a huge number of additional conditions on it. I then read the appeal statement for the 58 earth lodges, and it seemed to me to be very clear from the conclusions in paragraph 21 of the appeal that the inspector was basically refusing this or dismissing the appeal on, he said, I conclude that the development proposal would have a significant harmful effect on the appeal site, the surrounding landscape, and would be contrary to policy EN6 of the local plan and paragraph 172 of the framework. And he dismissed the benefits aspect, the social benefits. He gave that very, very limited weight. And also he gave the economic benefits moderate weight. And that included creating 5 full-time jobs. He didn't give much weight to the additional spend to the economy. He was obviously concerned about the tranquility and that it was noticeable. And he was giving the AONB the greatest weight. Then, of course, we come to what the High Weald AONB unit has said. And they have not actually, quite unusually, objected to this outright. And they've gone into considerable amount of detail in their response about certain aspects they felt that should be covered. A lot of those have been outlined to us in the officer's report, but also these have been dealt with in considerable detail in the design and access statement. There are various points that concern me, and I'm sorry if I'm going on at length on this, but I've looked at this actually very, very, very closely because it is highly contentious. And if we do agree this in some form or other, I'm concerned about this aspect of the complaints because a lot of the objections we've received are covering complaints. And we don't seem to have made any mention in the officer's report about the nature of these complaints, how many they are, whether they've been logged, and really what they, what are they? Just that there is a general sort of noise. I also feel that the noise management plan that the applicant has put forward is skimpy, to put it mildly, and the environmental health letter basically seems to wave it through on the basis of, quote, absence of any noise complaint to the council, unquote. A question would be, to what extent have officers actually looked at the logs on what has been going on in terms of the usage of the camping within the permitted development of the 28-day period? Another point that comes out in all of this is I'm still very uncertain and unclear exactly how much this has been used in the 2 years that the PD has, and whether there is some formal advice as to the numbers that have come in and capped and the zones that have been used. Because clearly the damage that may be done to neighbours will depend very much on the proximity of it, of the camping sites to the neighbouring properties. I do see that this is a reasonably closed site in terms of visibility, although I am sort of slightly unclear why the inspector felt that 58 earth lodges, which are built into the side of the gradient, would still be significantly harmful. Clearly, a whole load, as Councillor Howell said, a whole load of multicoloured tents and motorised caravans will be far more intrusive. But really, to what extent will they actually be seen by the outside world?
Councillor Roundell, you're making some really good points, and I'm sure that the officers have written them, them down and will answer them all. But are you able to sum up fairly quickly, your final points? I'd quite like some answers as to the real usage that's been going on since 2018 in terms of numbers, because if there have been a huge number of numbers coming in and camping, I can quite see that if it is limited to just say 80 or even less, and we perhaps got rid of some of the zones, particularly Zone A, that maybe this is how we should be looking at the proposal. I don't feel the proposal as it stands at the moment is that acceptable, but I think that probably with a lot more work on it, it might come up with something a little bit better. That's just my views at this moment in time. So back to you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Roundell. I had a question. This proposal is in essence an intensification of use, I would think, unless, as Councillor Roundell has just asked, it can be proven that in the 28 days, for example, there were far more than, on average, 80 people on the site at any one time. That'd be interesting to know that. But my question is, and this is based on sort of my feeling of the mood of this meeting, is that the majority of the members of this meeting aren't against the provision of a campsite here. But there is concern about control of the activities on that campsite, and concern about the size of that campsite potentially, and concern about the length of the temporary license. My question is, could we ask the applicant to phase in this campsite so that control could be, the extent of control could be established, and noise and everything like that could be monitored, and then over time increase the what we grant, or is that would that be totally unacceptable, do you believe, to the applicant on viability grounds? So that's my question. That's the end of 3 more councillors speaking. So please could you answer the questions that have been raised? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I can just pick up on the 28-day 28 is over, and I'll pass to Mr. Robbins for the remainder of the questions. So the 28-day rule that's per calendar year. So they've got 28 days throughout the whole year that they can use the site for camping. There is no restriction on the numbers of tents or pitches per that day. But in terms of numbers, so for 2018, during the 28-day period, there were 247 pitches which were occupied. I don't have the split per day, but that's the total throughout the 28 days. And so for 2009, the total for the 28 days was 377 pitches which were occupied. And in this current year, given COVID, the government introduced new PD rights, which means that you could double your 28 days, so it went to 56 days. So the number of pitches that have been occupied this year within the 56 days is 1,196. I hope that gives some indication of numbers, and I'll pass across to Mr. Robbins.
Thank you. Chairman, through you, sort of picking up the rest of the questions and the points that have been raised, and I think you summarised it quite neatly, Chairman, with members might accept something, but there are some concerns about what might happen. And I think Councillor Johnson also asked that question. What would happen if the pledges and the promises which are embedded within the application, if those were breached? And there's a couple of ways of answering that in my mind. It is a temporary planning permission, 3-year fixed period, and if at the end of that period, it's almost certain we would receive an application to make the use permanent or to extend the temporary period, and if in the trial run period, there were problems, not to put too fine a point on it, then that would clearly inform the assessment at officer level, and indeed I'm sure at committee level, were it to arrive there, in terms of the assessment of whether we give a further consent, be it temporary or permanent. So there is that control in place. Of course, in the intervening period, in the 3-year period, if there was a breach of the noise management plan, if there were problems around lack of management of certain features and uses, then those could, because it'd be a valid planning permission, be reported to the department, and we would investigate potential breaches of planning conditions. There's a further control involved. And it might be the case that members might look to a reduced period, although I think there would be some viability concerns for the applicant around that. They've asked for a 3-year period, I think specifically to obtain some form of certainty going forward in terms of their business plan. So whilst it's within the gift of the committee to reduce the period, that's not what is sort of set out within the submission. What we might look to, and we've done elsewhere, I can think of at least one site. In fact, it was the same planning agent, albeit a different site in the north of the district, where we introduced a break clause within a temporary period. It was for a different reason. It was around potential impact on an ecologically sensitive part of the site. So there was a management plan of this ecologically sensitive part of the site, which they had to submit at various seasons. And we would review that and be confident prior to the commencement of the second seasonal use, so the second year. So if there were problems on the sort of ecological impact, then the 3-year consent would fall away, because we would pull up the brake and say, we now know there is a problem having regard to the sort of intervening monitoring, therefore the temporary consent falls away. What we might do here, if members were concerned about that, particularly around noise and activity and kind of rowdy behaviour that we have heard in the debate that goes to the noise management plan, we might invoke a sort of break clause in the midpoint of the 3-year period. It might be that members don't, the majority of the members don't feel that that's absolutely necessary, and I could give some further advice if that doesn't make sense. Finally, I mean, Councillor Roundell spoke about the previous appeal and his concerns about impact on the AMB and the scale of the development. The matter about logs of objections, I mean, we were alive to concerns that were received in regard to the submission which flowed from the permitted development use of the site for the last couple of years. And of course, as members have seen in the report, as officers, we were unhappy with the 100 pitch scheme originally tabled and asked that there be revisions to the scheme, which has shown the withdrawal of Zone A. So we were unhappy as officers on the scale as originally tabled. So I hope that helps. On the matter of the appeal decision, all I would say, Chairman, is that paragraph 21 is the conclusion in regard to the impact on the AONB. This is the previous appeal for the earth lodges, I mean. And then, of course, it goes on further up to paragraph 33, and there is a planning balance. There's a balance of all things considered. Councillor Roundell is right that the inspector was in totality concerned about impact on the AONB, but of course it was for a different scheme, and it was for permanent operational development in the AONB and on a different scale. We are talking about use of the land for a temporary period. Coming back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Thank you, Mr. McSweeney. Next councillor to speak is Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This certainly is a difficult question, but I think one of the things that we all tend to forget is at night time, no matter where you are, noise travels a considerable distance. And I am concerned that this company is not really policing its own restrictions really to a satisfactory manner. I'm almost tempted to want to dismiss this and ask them for a full report on how they manage the campsite and the people using it as far as noise and sticking to their regulations as they should be doing. It is extremely difficult. I don't want to outright refuse this application because I didn't think it would be right, considering they do have the PD rights. So why do they need it? And certainly through the pandemic, they've certainly benefited from it by a serious increase in the number of campers they have had there. So unlike other places that have suffered considerably. So I won't give them any sympathy as far as coronavirus is concerned. They don't need it. But I would like to propose acceptance with conditions that we do receive a serious report, or to put in the gap that Stacey has actually said we can do, because we do need to ensure that the noise from the campsite and also the travel to and from that site is kept proper, is done properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. We did already have a proposal for acceptance from Councillor Bowdler. So, Councillor Bowdler, could I come back to you and ask you whether you would be happy to amend your proposal to include the break clause?
I think I'd rather like Mr. Robbins to talk me through that before I agree to it, if that was okay.
Okay, yes, we can do that, Mr. Robbins.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, through you. So members will have seen within the papers that condition 7 of the main agenda sets out the period of the year, the sort of seasonal activity. And of course, we're talking about 3 years of that activity. And what we might do, what I had in mind when I was addressing the committee earlier, is we might specify a further period in between those seasons, so between, say, seasons 1 and 2 of the 3-year period, where we would impose a further condition that says subject to satisfactory acceptance of the noise mitigation plan at that point, and word the condition in such a way that if the pollution control team were unhappy about the noise mitigation strategy, then seasons 2 and 3 would fall away. So it's a sort of, if you like, trapdoor within the temporary period that says, you know, adhere to the parameters of the consent. You know, we're going to take you at your word, but if there's a problem at the end of the first year, then the second and third year would fall away. But the sort of verifying that, because we might still get objectors, verifying that would be a sort of professional input from the shared service pollution control. I hope that helps, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins.
I think I'm more than happy. I think I'm more than happy with that, Chair. It sounds a sensible conclusion. It sounds like a really sensible conclusion, so I'm more than happy to go with that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowder. So just to confirm now, we do have a proposal on the table and has been seconded in line with officer's recommendation, but to add the break clause as described by Mr Robbins. Next speaker is Councillor Steadman.
Thank you very much. I would ask Councillor Bowdler and Councillor Firth if they would also look at condition 9, which talks about, very short and sweet, there should be no amplified music at any time during the operation of the campsite. I too read the design and access statement, and I have read the whole report. My question about the toilets was really to emphasise that I don't think there are enough, and I will come to that. But in that design and access statement, or somewhere, I have read that it is proposed there be no, strumming of guitars and bongos. Now, I live down from a school that teaches bongos and drums out in the playground, and it's not pleasant. So I would really ask that condition number 9 is beefed up to say any music. I have seen the word in some. Sorry, I have seen the word like that somewhere. Oh, look, I can see that Councillor Bowdler, a keen musician, is not happy with that. But the worst thing in the world would be 9:30, 10 o'clock, listening to somebody playing an out of tune acoustic guitar. I'm still not satisfied with the mobile toilet provision. People are still going to have to walk in the middle of the night to it, and those that can't will obviously go al fresco as suggested and as allegedly happened. So I think I would ask for, well, certainly further details. What is this provision? Is it top grade, medium grade? Are there male, female, disabled facilities? I think we would need more information on that before you issued the decision notice. But other than that, I think the break clause is the best thing that could be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowdler. I'll let you consider what Councillor Steadman has said, and if I come next to Councillor Hallett and then Councillor Roundell.
Thank you, Chair. I assume I'm live now. Yes.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are live.
Yeah, I do think I could be persuaded to support the principle of a campsite. It seems as though what we, in a way, are doing is exchanging unregulated camping facility for something a bit more regulated, so the numbers are restricted to 80 and such like. So I do see camping as very much compatible with the rural nature of the area of outstanding natural beauty and the leisure pursuit. I am much more concerned about the inclusion of motorhomes. Although it's called a campsite, actually, then they said, and motorhomes, which I think changes the nature of what they're asking for considerably. I think people who come and camp will come and stay for a few days at least in the area, will tour in the area, make use of the facilities at Buell Water perhaps. I think motorhomes can be, or these pitches could be used as stopping off points for motorhomes, particularly en route from the Channel Coast, for instance, and things like that. And they make a point of saying they're not providing electric charging points, which means that motorhomes will be tempted to have engines running and such like, to charge batteries, such like. And I think I would be much happier to go along with this and accept it if either we could eliminate motorhomes from the proposal for approval, or maybe if they can't be eliminated, could it be restricted to a fairly low number of motorhomes? I do think, if you imagine having 80 motorhomes parked at Buell Water at one extreme, it just would be unacceptable. But a campsite is different, conjures up a different image. So I would like to know, if from officers really, is there a mechanism for at least restricting the number of motorhomes as a proportion, perhaps? And if so, would the proposers to accept this be happy to have that included as a condition? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. Next is Councillor Roundell.
Yeah. I don't. What worries me about something like this is that a temporary thing becomes permanent. It becomes so much more difficult to rein the proposal back. And I would far rather, if we're going to give to do something on this, and I'm very conscious of what the local ward members have said, because they have not precluded in their speeches that something should happen here. But I still feel what is in front of us is wrong. And I would far rather, I'm afraid, I hate asking for deferrals, because I think that if I've got the plan in front of me up here, and obviously Zone D in itself, which is for 45 sites, which is more than 50% of the numbers being put in. That if you could get rid of Zone B and Zone C, you would most certainly reduce the noise impact on the houses to the left, and you get rid of any sort of problems of, as one of the local ward members said, al fresco usage of the wooded area that separates them. And I see that also on this local plan, on this plan, that if you look at the area to the right of Zone D, there could be potential to put something on that, and you're therefore isolating the campsite from a lot of the other areas, and certainly from the neighbours, because that's what really worries me, is the impact on the neighbours. And I don't think the noise impact plan is nearly sufficient. It needs to be tightened hugely as well. I totally take on Councillor Hallett's comment about motorised caravans, although actually to some extent it could be argued that the noise reduces a bit because they go into the caravan, especially when it's raining, but which it often does. But that's why I really am very, very loath to support the proposal as it is put in front of us. I'd far rather it goes back to a deferral to see whether they can come up with something that will be viable, but actually is far more helpful reducing the noise and so on. And so therefore I would like to put in for a deferral.
Thank you, Councillor Roundell. Is there anyone who would like to second Councillor Roundell's proposal?
Well, I was happy to come to speak next. Actually, Councillor Hallett made the point that I forgot to make about there being no motorised vehicles. And in fact, Councillor Roundell has very clearly pointed out some lack of information that we've got on it. I think I agree with you that, and as I said at the beginning, we're between a rock and a hard place, because even if we refused this, they could carry on camping, as the saying goes, next year anyway, under the 28-day rule, with unlimited numbers, with tourers. Goodness knows, I don't know whether under the 28-day ruling, whether or not they'd even be allowed to bring in caravans. So I think a deferral actually could be an answer to renegotiate further, to give them a stronger message that we're not happy with the numbers, to give them a stronger message and the officer a stronger arm to use to say we're not happy with motorised, it must be tents only, to clarify the noise issues and strengthen condition 9, and also to study the mitigation strategy and to warn, and I think it should still even when it came back, I think the committee would still expect either a reduced temporary period or with a break clause. I can't see Mr. Robbins pulling too bad a face on my suggestion. So I'm hoping that all the concerns that have been raised and people are still slightly uncomfortable can be put into the reasons for deferral, and that Councillor Roundell would support any suggestions that I've made and added to his reason for deferral. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. The last person who's indicated to speak is Councillor Hallett, and then I will come to officers. I think we've given, and then I can come to local members after the officers have spoken. But what I'd like officers to address, please, is the deferral and what reasons we could use. And I'd also like, if we were minded to accept, so you could help advise Councillor Balder and Councillor Firth, could condition 9 be beefed up, as it was said, and could we say anything about the volume of motorhomes that we could suggest could be on the site at any one time? Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, did you want that now, or were you going to go to Councillor Hallett? So forgive me. So slightly off guard. The question that I think was raised at the top from Councillor Mrs. Stedman was around bongos and drums, and actually it's that exact wording which is set out within the noise management plan. So there's already a commitment under a section, rules and policies applied to control noise, which has been reviewed by the pollution control team, as we know. There's a series of commitments and points there. So if it's the will of the committee, we could top up conditions to refer to that, or simply refer to the report in its totality. Either way you slice it, there is a noise management report which informs the scheme, has been reviewed by the pollution control team, and they are not objecting. So there will be no amplified noise, and there'll be no bongos or drums or other percussive instruments, is what it says within the noise management plan. I mean, the other points, Chairman, when we've heard about the deferral and really it will have to go to the committee. I mean, for me, I don't want to appear crass, but we've heard some earlier points in support. We've heard reservations. Really, Chairman and members, what we've got here is a try before you buy. It's a temporary consent with a trial period specifically so that the applicant, as was acknowledged at the top by the agent advising, that they've listened, they are aware of objections, they feel that they can persuade everyone in the area and the committee through a trial run period that they can make a good go of this. If they don't, then we have the power to withhold any subsequent application to make the use of the site permanent. It's as simple as that. I know Councillor Roundell said that he was worried that temporary becomes permanent, or I think he said it becomes more difficult to resist a permanent. And I do understand the general points within that statement. But what I reassure the committee is, if there are sufficient and persuasive material considerations at the end of the temporary period for us to resist any submission to make it permanent, then we can bring that to bear in a subsequent application. It's as simple as that. The point about touring vehicles or mobile units, well, again, it's really up to the committee to decide. I think Councillor Roundell was saying that potentially we might look to confining them to Zone D, because that would make those vehicles furthest away from the closest properties at Buell Bank and Beals Gardens and Hook Hill, which are the sort of closest properties on the western side, albeit they are divided by well over 100 metres to the edge of Zones B and the western edge of Zone C as it runs down. But having said all of that, Zone D is the furthest away, and if it was the will of the committee, you could specify that's where we would want to see the touring vehicles only. I mean, what I'm sure members all know this, but what you often get is people turn up and they have tents attached to the mobile vehicle, sort of motorhomes, as a sort of quasi camping plus more mobile activity, that's what you see. And so members could look to that. But really what I would impress upon the committee is we've got a trial run. We've already spoken about a break clause. If it all goes wrong and there are problems and there are objections, and that fundamentally the pollution control team say, actually, this is a problem and there are issues to do with nuisance, the noise management plan isn't working, well, then we would invoke, in my mind, as the debate has set out, we would invoke the break clause at the end of year one, and we would say we're not persuaded. So I hope that helps, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. My apologies to Councillor Hallett. I did miss you out. I'm very sorry. But so I've got 3 further speakers. I think we've had quite a good and lengthy debate about this, and then I propose to proceed to the vote. So first is Councillor Hallett, then Councillor Bowdler, and then I will revert back to the local members for closing comments. So Councillor Hallett, and once again, my apologies for skipping you.
No issue, Chair. Thank you. I was simply going to second Councillor Roundell's proposal for deferral, but Councillor Steadman has done that and listed. I think there are quite a number of significant issues that we still would want answers for. If the easiest way to do that is a deferral and time to go back to the applicant, I think we should do that. But if officers advise that we can achieve the same result by conditions, then I'll be happy with that. But I would like to see the number of motorised caravans on site at least restricted to quite a low number. They can be used just as one-night stopovers, and it would be an attractive location for that. And I think that would be, it doesn't really fulfil the tourism aim of this, and it would be detrimental, I think, compared to a tented campsite. So if it can be done, officers haven't really answered the question, can that be done by condition? If not, I think we should defer so that there's time to negotiate with the applicant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowdler.
Thanks, Chair. You would have to drag me kicking and screaming to ban guitar strumming from a campsite. We've all got fond memories of that, I'm sure. Mr. Sweeney's demonstrated with his figures the need for something like this. I thought the comments by Councillor Steadman on the amplified music had already been addressed by the break clause. I thought that would have sorted that out without the need for any further restrictions. And as for motorhomes, how many restrictions do you want on this campsite? I mean, they might as well throw their hands up in the air and say no to everything. If you keep putting all these restrictions on them, they're trying to run a business, and we're trying to run a successful Wealden. So let's give them a chance.
Thank you, Councillor Bowdler. So your proposal stands as it was before, just with the addition of the break clause. If I now come to Councillor Stanley as local member.
I'm just trying to turn my camera on. Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and I do understand the dilemma of the committee because it is getting that balance, and we know particularly in the A and B. As you know from what I said earlier, one of my significant concerns is the number of motorhomes, because I think 80 large motorhomes on this site is quite different from 80 tents. And if the inspector felt the 58 earth lodges was an intrusion, I'm sure large motorhomes. So I do, and I think maybe Councillor Bowdler won't accept this, but whether we could put, if the committee is minded to approve, and I don't know which way it's going to go, whether there could be a restriction on the numbers and the length, because there's a huge difference between a big motorhome, which some of them are massive, and a small camper van where, say, people put a kind of side awning on. And I wonder whether we could actually do something on that. So it's numbers and length, because I say it could easily turn into a completely different site. And I think the comments made about the toilet blocks, and I think that may be done by, if it's deferred, that can be done by talking to the applicant. If it's approved today, that's something to make sure that the very near neighbours don't have some of the problems that they say they've had of people using or littering, etc., etc. So I don't know which way the committee is going to go, but I think those are the points that I would like to make. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Howe.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I thank you, the committee, for a very good debate. I know it's a very difficult situation that you are all in. I've done it myself, so I am well aware of what you are doing and why. I agree with everything that's been said about the motorised homes. I think those should be restricted. I would also like for officers to put a note, an informative, whatever you like, that the owners of Buell make the users of the whole of Buell, and I mean the whole of Buell, aware of the bylaws and the restrictions therein. Because once you leave this campsite, which you can do quite readily, and of course you will, because that's what it's all about, they then proceed into communal areas with the rest of the residents, with the rest of the users of this area. And it can be very unpleasant, to be frank. And I know that Mr. Robbins is aware of it. We have talked about this already. So it would be very useful if the owners, if they are given this permission, make the users well aware of what is going on in the rest of Buell and what they may and may not do. Because if you're coming from the outside, you may not be aware. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Bowdler, could I just come back to you? I saw you put your camera on and stuck your fingers up to indicate acceptance when Councillor Stanley was speaking. Is that around perhaps placing a restriction on the number of motorhomes and the length? Is that?
Yeah, I'd be quite happy with that. Thanks.
And I'm going to allow Councillor Robbard, you will be the last speaker. Then I will come back to officers just to confirm the two proposals, and then we'll take the vote. So, Councillor Robbard.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we could ask the officers if it's possible to condition a few electric vehicle charging points. That would help with the transport plan, possibly. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm now going to come back to officers and let's deal with the proposed for approval first. So it's in line with officers' recommendation with the addition of a break clause, with the addition of some restriction on the number of motorhomes and the length of motorhomes, and with an informative about the bylaws which exist around Buell Water as a site as a whole. Would that be something we could do? It's basically the question.
No, I don't think so, Chairman. Not in the full detail. So, if members are worried about the number of touring vehicles and their size, which I do understand, I'm not trying to go behind the reasoning. I understand the reasons why that has been suggested. Then I would suggest that goes to a deferral. We would need to go back to the applicant to seek their views on that. What I had in mind, linked to Councillor Roundell's suggestion, was that we might confine to only Zone D the touring vehicles, to place them in that area rather than get involved in the scale of them and how long they were there. So, for example, Councillor Hallett said restricted to one night only. My worry is that we would have to police that. I mean, I gave a commitment earlier that we'd be involved in planning conditions and ensuring that they are complied with, and that goes without saying. But if there happened to be a touring unit that was half a metre longer, we'll be told, and the enforcement team will be up there all the time. So I'm not sure. We need a set of conditions and controls that are workable and enforceable. And in my mind, confining the mobile units to the touring vehicles to Zone D is easy and simple to enforce and police. Getting involved in the exact numbers and the scale of them, I think, is a bit further, and that would really go to a deferral. The motion, rather the proposal for approval with further conditions in regard to the noise that we've all heard and the brake clause is all perfectly acceptable. I don't see an issue with that. Electric charging points are expensive, and this is a temporary trial run, so I'm not sure we can impose that sort of cost on this, on what is essentially a temporary scheme, without going back to the applicant and asking them about that because of the commitment to cost. So Councillor Robbard's point, I recognise the reasons around it, but I'm nervous about adding that onto a temporary consent because of the cost involved. Sorry, that probably doesn't help, Chairman, but that's the advice I've got to give to you all.
That's okay, and you're still comfortable with any reasons we could give for a deferral. I take from the. I have got Mr. McSweeney has indicated he wants to speak as well.
Yeah, just to come back on Mr. Robbins' point about Zone D and the motorhomes, which I can see from a visual point of view that's an ideal position. However, my only concern, while we might have to do a deferral, is from a practical point of view. That is a grass field and it is a sloping grass field, whereas Zone C and D, they've already got the roads and hard standing. So from a practical point of view, I don't know whether Zone D would work for the motorhomes, but if we go with a deferral, then that point can be discussed with the applicant and their agent. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Roundell, you will be the very last speaker, and then I will come to the vote. Councillor Roundell, there you are.
I realise that I'm last speaker. I try hard, as you all know, never to be the last speaker. Now, could I just correct a possible misunderstanding here? I'm not talking about just confining to D, Zone D. I want to confine everything to Zone D, including any number of motorised caravans that might be in. I don't want B and C to have campsites on them. It's as straightforward as that. And I think it needs to go back for the deferral on that basis. So therefore, and I'd want the deferral to be without prejudice to anything.
Councillor Steadman, as seconder for the deferral, are you happy to continue to second the deferral?
Well, I thought it was a much wider deferral covering all the points, and I believe that if we were to say we're deferring it to negotiate camping on one part of the site only, we've kind of already made a decision. I mean, if that happened, if that's what the outcome was, that's one thing, but to specify that and sort of design by committee, I'm not happy with. So I will withdraw my seconding, and if necessary, I'll make my own proposal for a deferral for all the reasons that we have already stated, that we're not really clear on. Could we negotiate on the numbers? Could we negotiate on the areas? Mr. McSweeney has just told us that the area where we want to put the mobile units is a sloping field, so that may not be possible. It's almost thrown even more balls in the air. So I would say a general tightening up of everything that has been discussed would be my request for a deferral. I hope that makes sense. It may not make planning sense, but I hope Mr. Robbins...
Okay, thanks committee. You really are giving me an easy time today, aren't you? So, so I'm going to go to Councillor Roundell's deferral first. So currently now it's only been proposed by Councillor Roundell, and his deferral specifically is around Area D. And that the activity should only occur in Area D. If I have understood Councillor Roundell correctly, I see Councillor Roundell wants to come in again, so I'll let him do that before I ask if there's a seconder.
Thank you, Chair. That would be my preference, but I would actually back Councillor Steadman's deferral.
Okay. Yeah.
It is without prejudice, and that's what I said.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Roundell.
They would have listened to what we've said.
Yeah.
I would have thought that it's pretty clear how we're looking at it. I'm concerned about neighbours' amenity. Okay.
Thank you.
Whatever you want.
Yeah. Okay. That's brilliant. Thank you for clarifying that. So I will now come to the vote. We have two proposals on the table. The first is proposed approval in line with Officer's suggestion proposed by Councillor Bowder and seconded by Councillor Firth, It has got the addition of the break clause, and it has got the addition of the informative about the bylaws. The second proposal is proposed by Councillor Stebbin and seconded by Councillor Roundell now for deferral, basically for further consideration and discussion with the applicant. So they're the two proposals on the table. So if I take the proposal to approve first, and if I go through people's names, could you please say yes, no, and to indicate your vote. So Councillor Bowdler.
For.
Councillor Firth.
For.
Councillor Hallett.
Against.
Councillor Johnson. For. Councillor Owen Williams.
For.
Councillor Obbard.
Against.
Councillor Reid.
For.
Councillor Redman.
For.
Councillor Roundell.
Against.
Councillor Steadman.
Against.
Councillor Waller, myself, I'm for. Councillor Howe, for the record or for the recording, please.
Local member.
Thank you. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 votes in favour, 4 votes against. So that is carried. I don't believe now I need to go for the vote for the deferral. And after that marathon, I'm going to hand back to you, Chair. And thank you for listening in, Polly. But please, could you log off of the meeting now?
Thank you very much. I would suggest that we have a 10-minute comfort break because you've done exceptionally well. Well, you haven't because you didn't do what I wanted you to do, but there you go. A 10-minute comfort break, if you don't mind, and then we'll see you in a minute. Okay?
Chairman, can I just remind everyone you will need to turn your cameras and your microphones off for the 10-minute break?
Oh, before we go, to make sure that everyone has come back from the break. I will start with you, Councillor Bowdler. Are you?
I'm here. I'm here. Thanks.
Councillor Firth.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hallett.
Present, Chair.
Johnson.
Present.
Owen Williams. Councillor Owen Williams. I'll come back to Councillor Owen Williams. Councillor Obbard.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Redman.
Present.
Councillor Rondell.
Present.
Councillor Steadman.
Present.
Councillor Waller, I can see you, and I am also here. Mr. Robbins, you are here.
Yes, Chairman.
Mr. Moss, you are here.
I'm here.
And Mr. McSweeney, are you also here? No. Has he gone?
I think he may have left the meeting, Chairman.
I don't blame him for that at all. Right. Councillor Owen Williams, are you in the meeting, please?
I'm in the meeting.
Thank you so much. Right. We will now go back onto the agenda, and we will go to agenda item number 8, which is WD 2020-0063, Land of Little Oaks and adjacent to Cobec, Blackness Road, Crowborough. That's pages 57 to 88 on your agenda pack. Do I have an officer update?
Chair, very little to add to what's in the written update, which I'm sure you've all absorbed. It was just emphasising a request for very minor relaxation on a few conditions, which I've set out the numbers in the update. This is to enable, as it's proposed to be a self-build development with phasing, to enable that certain requirements to be independent of each phase of development. It's merely sort of enabling the phasing to occur without breaching conditions. So it's a very minor tweak. It doesn't in any way water down the effect of those conditions as they apply to each plot. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we have had various speakers. Mrs. Maxwell, can you tell me if I know that we've got some statements that have come through, and I know that Democratic Services are going to read them if the people who are meant to be coming can't. So can you tell me how we stand on this at the moment now, please?
Yes, Chairman. I believe that Wendy Newton-May will be reading one of the statements from the objectors, Sian Bamford, and we have the two people speaking in favour of the application present. If I could ask Mr. Brown to turn his camera off, please, until it's his turn to address the committee.
Thank you. Right, Mrs. Newton-May, would you like to please read the statement on behalf of Sian Bamford?
Thank you, Chairman, certainly. I'm writing this in objection to the building consent being granted and will break down my reasoning behind why I believe this will be detrimental to the area. Although both areas of woodland have now been cleared, which I'm sure the committee are aware of the manner in which this has occurred, there are still numerous species of wildlife that reside within the natural habitat. We've seen foxes, badgers, owls and bats. Unfortunately, with the woodland being cleared, no official survey was completed before this habitat was destroyed. I'm thankful to say the badger, it seems only one has stayed for the moment, is trying to return to its set. The barn owls are once again in residence and as a protected species should be allowed to exist in this area, as should the bats and other birds of prey. Those that have to navigate Blackness Road know how hazardous it is at the best of times. It is a very dangerous road, not only for vehicles, but for pedestrians as well. Access is also an issue for emergency vehicles and refuse collection. Invasion of privacy with the planned application, myself and I'm sure all of my neighbours would agree that we will in fact lose all privacy from our garden and be overlooked in our homes. Some of us who reside along Tolwood Road have extended our properties over the years and have had to abide by a height restriction, with the land behind us being in an elevated position, would in fact exceed this height restriction no matter the size of the properties. Unfortunately, we have already seen damage done to our garden with the clearing of trees, and we have seen a huge increase in water in the winter months this year. and last year, and the runoff from the once full woods are now entering our garden and creating damage. The way the land has been cleared has not gone unnoted by us who live nearby. I would hope the committee also bear in mind when making a decision. These properties will bring no advantages to the area and just be detrimental. Thank you, Chairman. Back to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, I have two speakers in favour. The first speaker is Gordon Brown. Mr. Brown, if you could possibly turn on your camera and your microphone, you will have 2 minutes as soon as we do that, which will be timed by Councillor Waller. Mr. Brown.
I am Gordon Brown, one of the applicants, and I support the application. We are two families, the Browns and the Coates, who are looking to self-build properties on our own land for our own family's future occupation. Mr. and Mrs. Coates currently live at Little Oaks, a property adjacent to the site, and have lived and worked locally for around 50 years. The Browns have owned their part of the site for nearly 40 years. Our first step in this process was to take pre-application advice from a principal officer at the Highway Authority for a proposal of up to 10 dwellings so that we could design a safe access system. This scheme was largely based on the outcome of a traffic count and traffic speed tests. The officer confirmed no objections to our proposed access for 10 dwellings, but after careful consideration, we applied for just 3 dwellings, which, after appraisal by the transport report, the Highways gave us their full support. Indeed, we have designed the access to have little impact as possible on Blackness Road, and it preserves the look and character of the road. We believe our ultra-low density design of around 5 dwellings per hectare is in keeping with that of the surrounding area and cannot be considered as overdevelopment of the site. We were eager to address neighbours and planning officers' concerns raised through the process, particularly with regard to design. We worked very closely with planning to achieve this. We believe we have designed 3 well-proportioned and well-positioned dwellings. Therefore, I ask Council to grant permission for our application. Thank you for listening to me today. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. If you could turn off your camera and your microphone. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sam Sykes, who is also in favour. Could you please turn on your camera and your microphone? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Sam Sykes of ECE Planning. This application is for 3 well-designed self-built dwellings in a sustainable location in Crowborough. We welcome your officer's recommendation for approval. Members will be aware of the 5-year housing land supply position within Wealden, and clearly this scheme must be considered acceptable in principle. Members will note that the initial scheme submitted has been significantly amended during the determination process to address concerns raised by local residents, the Town Council and your officers. As a result, all 3 dwellings have been reduced in height significantly, as illustrated on page 71 of the committee report, removing a half-storey level of accommodation. At 2 stories, the properties relate well to surrounding development, such as the 2.5-storey dwellings of Little Oaks and Hazelwick, and the nearby large 2-storey properties of Tolwood House and the new dwelling located behind this. Garages have been detached from dwellings and reduced in size, and separation distances between dwellings have been increased to create a more permeable form of development. The street scene on page 71 also demonstrates the acceptability of the scheme from a visual point of view, and the proposal is clearly in keeping with the character of the area, made up of large dwellings in large garden plots. The scheme also now provides for extensive ecological buffer areas on the site boundaries and through the centre of the site to provide for wildlife corridors and ecological net gain. The vegetated areas to the front of the site would be retained and planted with additional native species, helping to screen development and enhance the street scene when viewed from Blackness Road. The perception of properties and views from Blackness Road would be greatly diminished as a result of this. In all other regards, the application is acceptable, and we would respectfully request that permission is granted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. The local member is Councillor Lunn, and I believe he has sent a statement which I I'm sure you have all read. That is precarious part of Blackness Road, attractive lane to walkers and cyclists, impact on ecology corridors, overlooking neighbours, much new local development here in construction site, issues excessively large properties not appropriate to the mix in the area. Right, I will hand over to the committee, and I can see that Councillor Bowdler would like to come on first. Councillor Bowdler, can you put your camera and microphone on, please?
Thanks, Chair. When listening to the speakers, my hackles went up when I heard that the area had been cleared already. I see on the papers there's photographs of mature trees there, so there's a bit of conflict about what the report is telling me and what I'm just hearing from the applicants. Could the officers just clear that up, please?
Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Obbard. Councillor Obbard, if you could turn on your camera and microphone, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to ask the officers a question to clear up with regard to self-build, the rules. I understand there are two families that wish to live in these houses, but there seem to be three houses. So will there be a member of family or one of the builders be living in two houses? How does that work? And do they have to live in the house for a certain period of time to qualify as self-build? And do we as a planning authority ever check up on this when we give permission for self-build properties? Thank you, Chair.
We have been through this self-build conversation before, but it's always nice to have it revisited, I think. I don't have any other speakers, so Mr. Robbins or Mr. Moss, who would like to come and show your face to the public today? Neil, you wanted to speak, so Mr. Moss, I'll go to Neil first because we'll do the three and then we'll come to you, give you something to chew on for a minute. Councillor Waller.
So my query really is around the size of these proposed properties in relation to other houses and buildings in Blackness Road. I mean, I don't live a million miles away from Blackness Road, and looking at the size of these proposed properties, even though they have been reduced, they are still, in my opinion, very large properties for the area.
Huge.
And would look out of keeping, in my opinion, with other properties in the area. So could you speak to us a little bit about mass and bulking and the size of these properties and why officers feel that these large houses are appropriate for that area? Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, now it's your turn, Mr. Moss. If you'd like to turn your camera and microphone on, please.
Thank you, Chair. Starting with the clearance of the site and Councillor Bowdler's issues, it may be helpful if I move to one of the slides which will help explain the area of the site and the planning officer's understanding. But as a start point, I can confirm that there's been no clearance at the site since October 2018 as the last date any felling took place. I'll just now try and share with you the mapping, which should assist, hopefully, the understanding. Hopefully now.
Yeah, you shared. We can see it.
And you can see that you can see my cursor. I'm just about to. You can see my cursor moving around the base map of the proposals.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. In terms of the site, the parent property is Little Oaks here, which in itself is quite a large property in floor space terms. Actually, while we're talking about it, not dissimilar to the proposals on site. Moving on to the site, we have plot 1, which is in an area at the moment which is actually has the appearance of garden. The update does talk to that issue there. It's clearly been, there's a number of rhododendron and more domestic plants in that area, in that central area, and grass. that part of the site is definitely, whilst we don't agree it's curtilage to Little Oaks, because there's effectively a more intimate boundary line here, you can walk through into this part of the garden, and it is more manicured. There are some trees retained, as you can see here, and some trees here. That area has been clear for some time. In terms of the essential character of the road, you have well-established tree bank and trees here, and the proposed new point of access roughly in line with a run of hornbeam, an overgrown hornbeam hedge, which has now been cut back with some mature species still at full height left at the east end here. Throughout the site, this part of the site, we'll show some photographs, but this site has a cleared appearance, although it is well vegetated around the boundaries. There are a number of trees within the site. Moving to plot 3, which is the easternmost part of the site, there was certainly some poorer category C trees in this area where a felling license was obtained to thin that area out, and it was all done in accordance with the felling license to create a potential plot. As you can see from the overview, we still have a fairly strong boundary retention intent here in terms of existing trees and augmentation, which is the area of green underneath, which is where a proposed ecological corridors are to be created and strengthened with additional planting. That's part of our own ecologist request to actually retain corridors within the site of decent width, at least 5 meters in all these instances here, and down the hornbeam line here, to create a wildlife refuge. In terms of the actual felling that's taken place, as I said here, it was done approximately 2 years or more ago. It was done in accordance with a felling license. There was no tree preservation order on the site. And having visited the site, the remaining trees that are affected here, very few now require felling. There's just a hazel with regard to plot 2. There's a group of hazel coppice here. There's also a small stand of holly as well, which is too close to this plot. But other than that, the actual definition of the land is now established. And from the tree protection and character point of view, the essential envelope of trees would be retained and augmented. So there is a concern about trees, and certainly officers don't like to condone tree loss. But in terms of what's on the site, this area here has very much a parkland cleared character. It's obviously of some significant period of time. To the east, you have an area here which is still partially wooded, but the quality of the trees here, mainly sycamore, some willow, there's some ash stands. They're unmanaged, very tall and spindly trees, not A category, not B category, and a proposal to retain around those boundaries. So that's the sort of tree aspects. I'll retain this because I need to talk to the sizes as well. Looking, if I can just, before I answer the self-build, if I can move on to Councillor Waller's question regarding the scale and size. Yes, they are large buildings. In the planning balance, we've had quite a dilemma here. The site is 0.7 hectares, which is a very large site. I mean, that's approaching sort of 2 acres. Each plot is in excess of half an acre. These are very large plots. They're larger than neighbouring properties in Tolwood Road, which are, as Councillor Waller's indicated, these are principally bungalows and chalet bungalows. And moving up the hill in a more localised area here, we have some larger houses. We have Tolwood House, which is a larger house, approximately 250 square metres. We have a new property built rear of it associated with the Jordan's nursery site, which I believe the owner of the nursery had developed with planning permission for about 380 square metres. So that's a large property in here and 2-storey. And down the hill, we have Hazelwick House, which again is a 2-storey property, which is in the region of approximately nearly 300 square metres. So there are some big properties in the vicinity. These properties are larger. There is no question about that. They're plot 3, which is at the north end here, sorry, more west end. This area here is approaching about 300 square metres. The other two plots are 2-storey. You've seen the reductions in the papers about taking the roofs down by about 1.5 metres. These middle plots are in the order of about 400 square metres, which is large, and they're 4-bedroom but have considerable accommodation within. The planning balance point here is they are very large plots. There is a natural constraint with the lane and the approach. We're trying to strike that balance between development fitting the plots and not impacting on neighbours. And from that point of view, what is the harm of the increased size? And that is the question we're asking. We do have housing development hereabouts. They are very large plots. Further intensification has been discouraged due to highway access points. And so that is where we've arrived at in terms of recommending these reduced scale dwellings. I'll move off back into sort of a screen share option if that's take that away. In terms of the question about self-build, the proposal is it's joint applicants, which members have heard, 2 families effectively. The intent is that they would develop as phase 1 the proposed access to the site, and they would add to that independently developing plots 2 and 3. Their proposal is to qualify basically for a self-build exemption and build out those 2 properties. The purpose of the phasing means that although there's no known self-build applicant for plot 1, it retains the option for a self-build investor or buyer to come along and take the property and not lose the ability to apply for exemption by the fact that plots 2 and 3 could have commenced. So that is the purpose of the phasing here. There are 2 properties and 2 families. They do, picking up on the point of qualification, there are stringent qualification criteria which the council very closely checks. The main one being the 3 years occupation of the property from completion. They have to serve on a certain documents to confirm when the property was completed. Within certain timelines, they have to serve evidence, proof that they are occupiers of the property and that the buildings have been conducted in accordance with self-build insurance policies or mortgages. There's a whole raft of paperwork, basically up to about 6 formal documents they are required to submit to the council to confirm at the outset that they are complying with that self-build criteria within 6 months of completion. So they have to do that. And at the end of the period, there's effectively a sign-off to check that they are still the occupiers, or else they lose that exemption. I hope that answers that question regarding self-build. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I have one other speaker who's put their name in the chat, so if you'd like to ask a question or anything, please do. Councillor Roundell, and then followed by Councillor Steadman. Councillor Roundell.
Yes, obviously 1 or 2 points here that are, to put it mildly, regrettable, especially this sort of Forestry Commission licence on thinning. And seemingly from the report, it has been clear-felled, which they didn't have permission to have. But I guess there's not an awful lot we can do about that. But it's not very good that that sort of thing happens. The other point, and I'm going to sound a bit like a gramophone record on this one, is this self-build aspect, because the thing that I find so difficult with self-build is that there is no contribution at all towards the sill or the infrastructure, and I just don't sort of feel it's fair on houses of this size, because they're big houses, not to be contributing to the infrastructure which we so badly need. So those are my comments. So back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Steadman and then Councillor Bowdler. Councillor Steadman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I must confess I'm a bit confused about the self-build. And I wonder if the Mr. Robbins or Mr. Moss could explain what would happen if they lose the exemption. And I think probably Councillor Roundell has alluded to that. The submission read out by Wendy Newton-May referred to water runoff since the land had been cleared. And can you confirm that within the report that there is a SUDS provision to stop any water from this site going into the properties on Tolwood Road? And could you also explain the comment about overlooking, and hopefully they wouldn't. And then my other question is, will there come a time when the cumulative amount of traffic in this area will cause such problems that the county council might eventually say enough is enough? Because clearly there are other large sites within this little road. I mean, it is an extraordinarily narrow road, but there are already properties there, and I suppose you'd have to say buyer beware. And finally, I'm sorry, I thought the felling was done under a license. I might have misunderstood that, if that could be confirmed. Back to you, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Bowdler. Councillor Bowdler.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on my way. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. Unusually and surprisingly, I find myself agreeing with Councillor Roundell, which is probably a new one for me. The last PCN, which I sadly did not take part in, but like an anorak, I sat and watched. You discussed an application site adjacent to Western Road, which has horrific traffic issues. And if I remember rightly, that was subsequently refused. And yet this is not mentioned. Western Road is the access point to this proposed development. And once you go over the railway bridge and turn right, the road narrows and then narrows even further into the site itself. I mean, construction is not part of the planning process, but I have difficulty understanding how construction traffic will actually access the site. I do agree that the properties are enormous, particularly plot 3, which looks like Hampton Court Palace to me, and I think it's quite over the top. But having said all of that, I don't like it, but I'm struggling to find any planning reasons to offer a refusal. Thanks.
I don't think it's up to us, particularly in these cases, to actually make a comment about this sort of thing. But I will come over to officers. Mr. Moss.
Well, Chairman, if I could come in perhaps before Mr. Moss, if that's okay, with your indulgence. Councillor Roundell and Councillor Bowdler have mentioned the SIL and the SIL exemptions, and have, expressed a strong opinion about the acceptability of the regulations. And of course, we have, as a committee, both North and South, previously debated that. And I think the point is well made about members' reservations in permitting development, but at the same time not adding to the evolving infrastructure pot. And I do understand that point, but nonetheless, as the committee have heard me say before, we can't criticise, I'm afraid, the applicant for drawing on legislative provisions that are open to them. The government has set out an exemption to SIL, subject to qualifying criteria, which Councillor Robbard has asked about that and whether we check and enforce and all the rest of it, and we do. But subject to compliance with those exemptions, then it's perfectly proper, it's perfectly acceptable that people lodge a planning application and draw on those exemptions. I know that sticks in the gullet, but I'm afraid we can't criticise, and we must not view applications negatively because of that. So unless and until there is a change to the legislation, and by that I mean the members will know that the white paper does talk to adjustments to the SIL process and regulations, but as of the here and now, we cannot really we can't reject applications because they are SIL exempt. And we haven't got into the debate, but there is a considerable unmet need for custom and self-build properties, as has been referred to in numerous reports in your agenda packs of late. Chairman, Councillor Mrs Stedman asked about flooding, and there is a condition, number 6, within the main agenda pack, page 58, which requires a scheme, a submission of a scheme that would correct that and control that. And I think there was also a question in regard to overlooking, but as has been explained to the committee, although these are large dwellings, they also sit in large plots, and we heard earlier around 5 dwellings per hectare. They're well in excess of the minimum separation distance that we use as a rule of thumb to measure and test impact on residential amenity, 21 metres back to back. I know we often receive objections that people feel nonetheless they'll be overlooked, but that's the yardstick we use for considering overlooking, and it just doesn't arise here, I'm afraid, Chairman. In regard to Councillor Bowdler's point on highway impact, it is correct that at a recent meeting of PCN, we refused, or the committee refused, planning permission for just over 20 units. I think it was 26 units at the junction of Hadlow Down Road and by the bridge at Weston Road. And members were concerned about that, and we had a long debate about that acceptability of that scheme. And that included in combination impacts on the highway and the convenience and safety of other users of the road. But I remind the committee that the Highway Authority did not object to that scheme. They were accepting of that scheme and had not opposed that development, nor do they object to this scheme. They asked for changes, those changes have been made, and we have a positive conclusion from the Highway Authority, East Sussex County Council, who are alive to the local issues. They do consider in combination impacts, and they are not recommending refusal in this case. So I hope that helps, Chairman. I think I've covered the questions.
No.
If not, then
Felling of trees.
Oh, the felling of trees point. Well, the access is shown on the layout, Chairman, on the layout plan which Mr. Moss shared with you all earlier, and it appears in the report. The felling of the trees was done in regard to, as Mr. Moss explained, in different phases across the site, abutting the existing curtilage to the donor or the existing dwelling. And there was a felling licence issued by the Forestry Commission. I think what we've got is the suggestion amongst those that have lodged comments in the case that more work was done than was permitted by the Forestry Commission. There is still part of the site down the bottom sort of southeastern corner of the site, as Mr. Moss explained, which retains some sort of wooded character, and a plot is proposed in that location. So there was a felling licence granted, Chairman.
Thank you. I have 2 more speakers, Councillor Firth and Councillor Johnson. Councillor Firth, if you'd like to turn on your camera and microphone, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can find no legal reason why these should be refused. I don't particularly like them. To me, they're too big and they're not particularly attractive looking buildings. But then that's my judgment. Blackness Road, I think I would ask officers to sit down with the County Council to discuss the future of Blackness Road, because I cannot see that road taking any more development in the future. If it did, it would really be a disaster. So all I can say is our only option on this development is to approve it. So I will propose approval because we have no legal or justifiable reasons to refuse it. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Councillor Johnson, you are next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to sort of repeat some of what's already been said, really. I'm not happy about the woodland being cleared, but, they had a licence. They've obviously gone a bit over the top with that. I note there's still a bit more of woodland to be cleared if this goes ahead. Just one query I had. I don't know if it's really a query. We talked about this being self-build for family, and yet, unless I misunderstood, the initial plan was for 10 properties. So if that is the case, then obviously a large family, I'm assuming. But now we're looking at 3 self-build. Looking at it from a positive point of view, they have worked with planning. they have taken on board some of what Highways have said. And just going back to Councillor Firth, I do think Highways should discuss the future, not just on Blackness Road, but probably with Wealdon and the World. But that's ongoing. What else was I going to say? Blackness Road, we know there's issues there, and I guess the answer is that if you are going to build something there, 3 larger properties is probably the right way to go, rather than looking at 10 properties or another solution because of the traffic, etc. I think that's probably all I have to say. So actually, I'm probably in a position now where I would, on balance, support Councillor Firth, and I will second her proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Johnson. I have Councillor Obbard to speak. I just would like to actually say, and we have this conversation always about highways. We have the conversation about highways all the time, and we're always told that highways look at it, highways no, highways, and we always find it very difficult. So if you're going to, we are on the ball, we keep talking about highways. Councillor Obbard, if you'd like to turn your microphone on, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to raise the issue of sustainability. You might be surprised. I noticed in the report on page 70 we had Wealdon Design Guide referenced chapter 2 and 7, and I just wonder why chapter 4 has been forgotten about again. The sustainability that in the applicant's planning statement, they have said that the roofs will be capable of having solar panels attached to them, and I wondered if we could have a condition that they do have solar panels attached to them, and similarly that they would sort of very much like to have electric vehicle charging points, and I would like to suggest that we condition that they do have charging points. So it's very easy to say, oh, we would love to have solar panels on our roof, and then not do it. And all building from now on needs to be as sustainable as it can possibly be. Zero carbon it should be. And so I'd like to add those conditions to our approval. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Right, Mr. Robert. Oh, Councillor Bowdler, you want to come in, please?
Yes, just quickly, please. I'd like to jump on the Obbard bandwagon, please. And if Mr. Robbins is going to consider those requests, if there was ever a plot of land with 3 houses that could afford to have a joint ground source heat pump, this is right up there with it, and we could use it as an example in the county. And I would dearly love the applicant to take that on board. That would be a great something that Wealdon could be proud of.
Mr. Robbins.
Chairman, yes, members. If I can answer that question, so there is reference to the design guide, and Councillor Obbard is right that there are further sections there. So if there's an omission, I apologise. I think what we could do, as we have done in other recent cases, is add a condition that requires the submission of a sustainability strategy, or a scheme which explains the commitment to sustainable construction. It might be solar panels, it might be a ground source heat pump, it might be both. But what we could do is, as the scheme advances through sort of building regulation stage and they know a bit more about it, we could ask them to add, lodge a scheme which explains their commitment to these. We have a standard condition. It perhaps should have been on there, so I apologise for that. We can add that. Just in regard to the other questions, Chairman, and the request from the proposer, Councillor Firth, in return to discussions with East Sussex Council, as you said, Chairman, officers do speak regularly to the county, to colleagues at the county council, in some detail around these sites coming forward. Of course, what then happens and comes out in the wash as applications are lodged is residents are unhappy with that assessment and feel that it's inadequate, or that insufficient consideration has been given. And I can say no more than that, Chairman, or other than to assure you that we do regularly meet and do discuss these issues. And Councillor Johnson asked about 10 dwellings and whether that was, a large family or so on. I mean, my understanding is that the very first meeting from the landowner and their representatives was with the Highway Authority in regard to a much larger form of development. They've obviously reduced that considerably. We are just talking about 3, but the initial discussions with the Highway Authority were in regard to 10 dwellings. That's obviously evolved and moved on, and it's not what's on the table. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, I have Councillor Waller and then I have Councillor Firth. Councillor Waller.
So notwithstanding there has been pre-application advice taken, or not pre-application, discussion between the applicant and officers. I still feel these properties are huge. They are out of keeping. They don't sit well in the local setting in terms of what they look like. And I feel these are reasons why we could refuse this application. I don't object to 3 properties being placed on this site. What I think I'm saying is I think the 3 smaller properties could be placed on this site for the reasons I've given. And so I would actually like and hope everyone sat down to propose refusal and my reasons are scale of the properties, bulk of the properties, out of keeping with the local area, design. They're my reasons. So I would hope I have a seconder. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, I have Councillor Firth, then Councillor Obbard, and then we will go back to officers. Councillor Firth, you're live, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comment is to Stacey to do with their meetings with highways. Could it not be arranged at some stage after the COVID is over that we can sit down with ward members as well as highways and yourselves? As members, we know our wards inside out. We know the roads on those wards. We know the issues. And I'm sorry, but under no circumstances can we expect people sitting in county council or in Wealden's planning department to know all the issues on roads and infrastructure. We need to be able to be included. And I'm sorry, but that's how I feel about this issue on transport. So I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Back.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Councillor Obbard.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I welcome the comments from our officer and Councillor Bowdler on the sustainability. That's great. While we're discussing, or while the officers are discussing the detail, could we perhaps look at the angle that the buildings stand in their plots? Orientation is something that makes quite a lot of difference to the angle of roofs for solar panels. So I don't know whether we can look at that, and also the insulation qualities and energy use of the building. I think is really, really important. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Robbins, you're shaking your head. Can I just check, because I wasn't quite clear. Can we condition solar panels, electric charging points, ground source heat pump? And yes, can we do that?
So we can, through you, Chair, we can and we do and we have in recent cases requested a scheme. Rather than strong arming an applicant to a specific measure, must be solar panels or it must be a specific technology, we ask for a scheme. And as the construction and the fine detail in regard to the construction through the building regulation evolves, we would require that scheme as part of the planning conditions and the discharge of them. So that's perfectly possible. What we cannot do, Chairman, because this is a full application, so all of the details are here and before you, we can't ask, I'm afraid, the applicant to consider the siting of the property because that's fixed. Unlike other applications that we often consider that are outline where certain issues are up for grabs, if you like, and there will be a reserve matters submission. So there are some they're not nailed down in the outline scheme. That's not what we have here. The siting is fixed. It is as shown on the layout plans that we've been debating. So it's a yes to the first point, but it's a no to the adjustment to the siting. That would go to a refusal of planning permission.
Thank you. Councillor Roundell, you are up.
I hope you're all sitting comfortably, but I'm actually going to second Councillor Waller's refusal.
Is that it? That's it. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. I would ask Councillor Firth, if you would accept to have a condition put onto your approval for a submission of a sustainable scheme for from the applicant. Would you be happy to take that?
I'm more than happy to take that, Madam Chair.
And Councillor Johnson, you are happy to second that as well, are you?
Yeah, happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, I will go with the first recommendation to go with the officer's recommendation for approval, put forward by Councillor Firth, seconded by Councillor Johnson, with a condition for the applicants to submit a sustainable scheme, which will look at electric charging points, solar panels and a ground source heat pump. Are you accepting of that, Mr. Robbins? Just nod, thank you. Great. All right, we will go with that. Councillor Waller, over to you.
Okay, so please say for or against for approval with the sustainability scheme. Councillor Bowdler.
For approval, and I hope the applicant takes notice. Thank you.
Councillor Firth.
For approval.
Councillor Hallett.
For approval.
Councillor Johnson.
For approval.
Councillor Owen Williams.
Against.
Councillor Robbard.
For approval.
Councillor Reid.
Against.
Councillor Redman.
For approval.
Councillor Roundell.
No. Against.
Councillor Steadman.
For approval.
Councillor Waller, I'm against. Councillor Howell.
For approval.
So that's 8 votes in favour and 4 votes against. So that application is approved.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we will go to the rest of the agenda. Thank you very much indeed. Katie, I'm assuming that the ladies and gentlemen we let in will now be let out.
Yes, Chairman, if I could ask those people who've just spoken on the previous item if they wouldn't mind leaving the meeting now, that would be much appreciated. Chairman, would you also like me to share the slide that I would normally share?
Yes, please. Right, delegated tree matters 89 to 94. Delegated approvals 94 to 114. Delegated refusals 115 to 116. The withdrawn list 117 to 120. Appeals in progress and decided, pages 121 to 124. Enforcement matters for information, 125 to 136. Urgent business. I actually did have a couple of things that I wanted to talk to about, but that can probably come under any other business. Officers. I need for Katie, first of all, to explain to everybody about, this is for the general public that might be tuning into this meeting as much as anything else, the dates and when you may or may not put in for a request to meet to speak at a meeting. We've had a few emails just recently with complaints that nobody knew. And the second thing Yes, thank you, Stacey. Other thing that I wanted to talk about, or ask Stacey Robbins to talk about, is for people who don't seem to know about planning applications where they live, and how we now need to let them know, or how they can inform themselves or keep themselves informed. So Katie, I will come to you about registering to speak and getting your message across about something you hate within the planning. And then I will go to you, Stacey, to explain to the general public how they can stay informed and keep informed about what's going on in the place that they live in. Katie.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, all in sort of guidance on how to register to speak on a planning committee is now available on the council's website. It is quite detailed on there, and it does explain to you how to register. But as a start, we would need you to email committee services to make that initial registration. Once you've done that, we'll add you to the speakers list, and you'll receive a confirmation email which will set out some more detailed information on timescales. The register to speak is open from the time the agenda is published, and that's normally at 12 noon on the Wednesday before a meeting on the following Thursday. We would ask that all requests to speak are received by no later than the Monday before the meeting at 12 noon. And as I say, Chairman, it's best to have a look at the guidance on the website, and of course you can always contact committee services who will assist you, but there are quite tight deadlines, and they are because obviously for the requirement for testing due to the way that we're holding meetings currently. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. Over to you now, Stacey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I had a couple of other points as well in AOB that I just wanted to mention, so I'll come back to those in a second. But on your point about publicity of, well, not just planning applications, but all applications that pass through the department, on the 1st of this month, we began a new process of how we notify local residents and those that live and reside and own land in a particular area. That's right across the district. This is in accordance with the updated statement of community involvement, which was amended and the subject of consultation at the beginning of the year, and went through various cabinet advisory groups, planning of cabinet advisory groups, and was eventually agreed at full council early on in the summer. I think it was the July date. And that statement of community involvement covered a wide range of matters, but it included development management applications. So up until the 1st of November, we were, as a planning authority, writing directly to adjoining owner occupiers to a planning application site and erecting a site notice. There were some additional consultations which have not changed in regard to publicity within a newspaper. There are certain trigger points for that which are set down in the legislation. Those are not changing, but the direct letter to local residents plus a site notice was an extra over. And what I mean by that is that the legislation set down by government says that planning authorities should do one or the other of those measures, and we took the decision as a full council that we would rely on site notices. We're not the first planning authority to do that. Some of our neighbouring authorities do that, and indeed up and down the country other councils have been doing that for some considerable time. So if you might say we're really just coming into line with what other councils are doing. The reasoning for that change is all set out within the papers in the statement of community involvement. There are various reasons, but one item for me is the drive to digital and the reduction in paper, which is a serious issue for us as a council. So that's already in train. So from the 1st of November, we have been doing that. We've liaised with parish and town councils on a number of occasions as this has been sort of emerging, the start date, the go live date, so to speak. So that has happened. But there are some additional measures, Chair and members, which I would mention in brief, but then ask you to have a look on our website, because there's an awful lot of information that we've placed on there. So it is possible for residents to register for updates on planning applications using the online planning applications database, which is available on the website. So you can set up an account and you can specify applications that you're particularly interested in. In fact, we urge residents to do that in order that they're kept up to date on applications. They get an immediate email alert to tell them that something has changed on a particular application which is of interest to them. But in addition to that, members will be very familiar, I'm sure, with the My Alerts facility, which covers a wide range of services offered by the council: bin and recycling collection and other, kind of key day-to-day important dates and activities that are occurring across all of the council services. And one of the options within My Alerts is to specify a radius, is it radius or radii, the distance around your property, and to specify within the area the types of applications that you are interested in being told about. And the My Alerts function will tell you about planning submissions within that range. So there's a combination of factors there. And in addition to that, we have also, as some members will know and residents watching, we have also embarked on a social media campaign. We've introduced a Twitter feed, which I am resourcing. So there's news and updates on that Twitter feed on a daily basis. We try to update it, not just in terms of planning applications, although it does include sort of topical and large scale applications, but also appeal decisions, other consultations. It's the first port of call for live updates on all things going through the department, not just planning, but of course trees, conservation, enforcement, and so it goes on. So I hope that helps. I would urge all members to have a look at our web pages because there's an awful lot of information in there. A couple of other points while I've got the floor, Chairman, with your indulgence, and I'll be quick. We are out to consultation on the 4th, so beginning of month, the 4th, I beg your pardon, the 9th, beginning this week, Monday the 9th, until the 4th of January, we are out to consultation on a change to our validation checklist. What's that? Well, that is the document that we use to set the benchmark for the quality of the submissions that come in, when certain reports are required, what we expect people to set out within their applications. Long story short, Chair, is that we are required to update that, and when we do update that, we must go through a process of consultation. Again, that's been trailed with our parishes and town councils. They all know about that. Plus, it's been raised within the Planning Cabinet Advisory Group. So it's currently live, and there is an online consultation portal which you can see from the website. The final point from me, Chairman, is just to flag really to members that you will see some dates appearing in your diaries from Democratic Services in regard to planning training, and the first module, the first course, there is a date which I believe is the 24th of this month. Yeah. I know Dem Services have been doing some work looking in members' diaries to look for gaps. Please do come along. We've spoken about training for an awful long time, and it's currently, it is now happening. So please do try and attend to that training. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, now we will go into consideration of exempt information and the exclusion of the public. Katie, do we now stop the live recording? What do we do?
Chair, we just need to resolve, the committee needs to resolve that they're happy to go into exempt session. Once that there'll be a short delay to ensure that we have stopped streaming, and then we can continue with the confidential part of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Right. Can you tell me if you are resolved and happy to go into exempt session? I will start with you, Councillor Bowdler. Yes.
Fine, thanks. Yes.
Councillor Firth.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Hallett.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Owen Williams.
Yes.
Councillor Obbard.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Reid.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Redman.
Yes.
Councillor Roundell.
Yes.
Councillor Stedman.
Yes.
Councillor Waller.
Yes, Chair.
And I am also happy. So, yes, we're all happy. That is a resolution.
Thank you, Chair. Would you just like to cover the date of the next meeting?
Oh, yes, the date of the next meeting. I don't know when it is. Oh, I do. It's on the 10th of December at 10:30. and it will be a remote meeting as usual. I think perhaps it'll be quite busy, won't it, Mr. Robbins?
Thank you, Chair.
It will be busy, Chairman. Sorry. Yes,
Okay.
it will be busy.
Thank you, Chair. I shall now instruct the IT department to stop streaming. If you bear with me a moment.